These are players that if you can buy them in fantasy football, we are going to recommend that you do it. It could save your fantasy football season or take your team to the next level. Talking about Nico Collins here, and Nathan doesn't necessarily agree with this one, and I understand why. This offense is abysmal there in Houston. It's just really bad. Nico, I think, has the ability to transcend because of the type of talent he is, but also because there's nobody else there, right? And so this is a game against Tennessee where Tennessee is so bad that this mediocre Houston Texans team was up 20 points to nothing, 26, I think, to nothing at some point. Look, I think that's why Nico only had 6 targets in this game. You just saw him come off a game against Jacksonville where he had 11 targets, had 8 receptions, had a touchdown, and had 22 points. I think 11 points is Nico Collins' floor at this point. I think in most games what you're going to see, for example, next week against Baltimore, he's going to absolutely eat, first of all. So you should buy him just because his stock is going to go up after the Baltimore game. He will cook Baltimore.
That's your best point.
He will cook Baltimore.
Yeah.
But I think most of the time what you're going to see is the Houston Texans either playing a tied ball game or playing from behind. And when you have that, they are going to throw the ball. And of course, I know that the offense is bad. I know the offensive line sucks. I know Stroud is getting beat to a pulp in that backfield. But at the same time, Nico is the only guy there. I mean, Jaden Higgins had a touchdown today, but that was, I think, his only catch of the day was the touchdown. Jalen Noel, I mean, he hasn't done anything hardly all year. He's had 4 targets in the year. And then Christian Kirk had 8 targets in his first week back, only had 4 against Tennessee. And so it's always going to be Nico or nothing, in my opinion there. And Nico is good enough as a playmaker, as a talent, to where I could see if you can get him at a cheap price in fantasy football, taking advantage of that, really, really paying off later in the season. And so, again, I think it's a market play, if anything, but because I think he's going to have a great week. But when you're looking at where Nico is kind of being priced at right now, it honestly just depends on your league. For example, in sharper leagues, like the Flock Expert Consensus ranking still has Nico as like the 11th overall player in fantasy football. But I think you're going to see a lot of people, like for example, I think you're going to see him in the Bucky Irving, CeeDee Lamb, Derrick Henry, Drake London, Rome Odunze, Josh Jacobs range for some people. And if you can send that group of guys, really anybody below like Devon Achane and down for Nico Collins, I would do it. I think that he has more upside than those guys. I think he's a better talent than a lot of those wide receivers. And again, I think he's just going to have more weeks where he wins you fantasy football games by himself because he's that type of player. I understand the situation's not great there, but Nico is that good of a player. And honestly, my main concern with Nico coming into the season was that he wouldn't stay healthy. And so far, we've had no concern about that. And so if Nico Collins is healthy, I'm confident that he will return on investment for your fantasy football team. I think I'm going to buy him this week. I'm going to try to get him in at least a couple leagues.
So Kenneth Gainwell having his massive game this week, 31 points against Minnesota was awesome. It was great for him. He's had games like this in the past. And obviously the reason that he got all this work and this opportunity is because Warren was out. Jaylen Warren is going to be my buy here. Ironically, Pittsburgh is actually going into a bye this week and in week 5. So you have like 2 weeks essentially to go and shop for Jaylen Warren and see if you can get him at a really solid price, because they have Cleveland in week 6 as well. So once you get back, you're going to have a tougher matchup against a team like Cleveland, who does shut down the run consistently. Jahmyr Gibbs had a good day today. He had like 17 points, but they did keep Monty from doing anything crazy. Look, do I think Kenneth Gainwell, with what he showed against Minnesota, is going to get more opportunity when Warren is back? Yeah, probably. I mean, he already was getting opportunity when Warren was on the field, but that's the beauty of having Jaylen Warren in this offense, is he's getting anywhere from like 50 to 60% snap share. He actually had more snap share against New England, more than we were used to seeing. But again, the volume and the opportunity, you're probably going to get used to seeing anywhere from like 15 to 20 touches between the grounds and the air. And with Warren in this offense, like you saw, that clearly Caleb Johnson is going to be a non-factor here for the foreseeable future. So it really is just between Jaylen Warren and Kenneth Gainwell. And while Gainwell had a great day, Warren is the established guy who they now are heavily monetarily invested in. They just extended him like in the middle of the season. And that's a really good sign for their continued loyalty to him and his opportunity this year, which is why I think he'd be a good buy over the next couple of weeks. You don't even have to do this now. If you have a teammate that has Jaylen Warren and missed him this week and is going into next week without him on the bye, and they lose 2 straight weeks, then maybe they want to start wheeling and dealing, and they're worried about that Cleveland matchup. And you're like, hey, I can take that on. I'll take Warren off your hands and get him before he comes back and produces and scores double digits again.
I'm going to have Xavier Worthy as a buy this week for fantasy football, really for this reason. We are 2 weeks away now from Rashee Rice coming back, and I've also learned a lot about torn labrums here in the last couple weeks. I've been researching, like, can you actually play through a torn labrum? How painful is it? Well, apparently you can. With physical therapy, if you manage the pain, you can play through a torn labrum, no problem. And playing through a torn labrum this week against Baltimore, he had 17 points in fantasy football. I don't care if both of his labrums are torn. If he's going to score me 17 points, he's in my flex spot. And 8 targets, 5 receptions. The reason that I'm not worried here, because there are going to be 2 reasons that your league mates fade Xavier Worthy. The first one is going to be because of the injury, obviously. And like I said, I've done the research, so I'm pretty much a licensed medical professional at this point when it comes to torn labrums. Second of all, people are going to short him because of Rashee Rice coming back. And my hypothesis with that offense is this. I don't think it's Xavier Worthy that takes any hit with Rice coming back. I don't think he does. Because when you're looking at the type of plays they're using Xavier Worthy on and the type of plays that they're trying to, get him open, it's normally long balls, which you saw without Xavier Worthy on offense. You saw Patrick Mahomes overthrowing guys like Tyquan Thornton because that is such an integral part of their offense and what they do. They're going to be consistently looking for those downfield shots, which is a welcome change, by the way, for the Chiefs. But they're going to be consistently looking for those shots, no matter who they're playing and no matter if Rashee Rice is on the field. And Worthy's going to get those. Not to mention, he also had a couple points on end-arounds / rushing carries, and they're going to continue to give him those carries. That's why they drafted him. Rice isn't going to take away from that. What Rice is going to come in and take away from is Juju Smith-Schuster's 6 targets today, because all of those targets, 13.6 points, all of those targets today were in Rashee Rice's range of the field. He's going to take away from Hollywood Brown. Hollywood Brown, yards per target here, 7.6. Hollywood Brown's no longer the field stretcher that you think he is. He's getting the Rashee Rice targets as well. And so between those 2 guys and maybe a couple of miscellaneous players, that's who Rashee Rice is really going to take away from. What you're going to see when Rashee Rice comes back is a very concentrated offense with Rashee Rice getting, 10 to 12 targets a game, Xavier Worthy getting 5 to 8 targets a game. But you're going to consistently see Xavier Worthy either have big plays and score 17 points or have touchdowns and score a lot of points. And so he becomes a high upside flex option in one of the best offenses in the league. The Chiefs were chiefing again this week. And so in my opinion, I think Worthy's worth a buy. I think people are going to short him for a number of reasons. And in reality, as long as he can play through it, and as long as he's getting the targets I think he's going to get, I think he's going to return on investment big time compared to where he's ranked. Right now, expert consensus. He's ranked next to Keenan Allen, Michael Pittman, Jalen Waddle, DJ Moore, Chris Godwin, Tony Pollard. He's probably going to go up in the rankings on the Flock site, but realistically, he would have to go up a lot. I would probably take him over T. Higgins rest of the season at this point. I would take him over Jacoby Myers at rest season at this point. And so you're talking about most of the guys in the, late 50s down on the rankings. Higgins, Myers, Chase Brown, Mike Evans, Tucker Kraft, Terry McLaurin. I would take Worthy over him. And so if you can get Xavier Worthy this week, if you can buy him for that price, I would be cool doing that because I really think people are overestimating how much it's going to hurt when Rashee Rice comes back into that offense.
So I want you to go back in time, and I know it was a bad time, but I want you to remember that Chris Godwin injury last year and how brutal it was and how tragic it was for the people that invested in him, and he was popping off, and then his season is ended. It's cut short. And you go all off season, not really knowing when he's going to come back. They've been so hush about it. And then you finally learn that he's going to miss the first few weeks of the season, but he's not going to go on PUP, so he might be back before week 4. He's back by week 4, ready to go against Philadelphia. Mike Evans goes down with a hamstring injury. He comes in, and you're like, I don't really know what his usage is going to look like. Limited snap share, probably. Is he really going to be a full go from his first game back from injury after he spent all offseason rehabbing? They chuck him right in there, and he gets 58 snaps, which is right behind Emeka Egbuka at 64. 40 routes run, 10 targets, the same amount of targets that Emeka Egbuka had. Egbuka obviously had a much more productive day. He was more explosive on the day. Makes sense because he's obviously the number 1 there at this point, clearly. But Chris Godwin, for a guy that we expected to have very minimal usage in his first game back, to get 10 targets in his first game back, people are going to look at the 5 points and they're going to be like, oh, this is slow. Oh, Egbuka gets all the touchdowns. Oh, Egbuka's clearly sustaining this touchdown work. And Mike Evans is going to come back, and now we don't know what it's going to look like once he's back. Yeah, there's obviously going to be risks and questions there. Follow the target volume. Follow the targets. If Godwin is going to follow the targets in the offense and in the volume that Baker Mayfield is going to consistently provide there. If Godwin is going to get 10 targets in his first game back from his injury that he had last season that was absolutely brutal, what is he going to do next? What is he going to be able to accomplish when he can haul in more than 3 of those targets, when they're not desperately slinging the ball all afternoon because they're trying to just get these 80-yard touchdowns so that they have a chance to even come back in the game, which they almost did. It was very, very close. You're going to have games that are built for Chris Godwin to produce. Absolutely built for him in the short to intermediate game. Chris Godwin is best and is at his best when he's working out of the slot, and he's kind of like you're kind of managing the game through him and taking clock off, and he's able to just be kind of that clock manager wide receiver with Baker Mayfield. So I think you're going to see a lot more consistent usage from Godwin from here on out if you saw it in week 1 with him back healthy. And if you can get him at a discount right now still after what was a slow producing week, I would go ahead and capitalize.
4-0 and 3-1 teams, congratulations. I have a buy for you now. Terry McLaurin from the Washington Commanders. As somebody who owns Terry in the most widely watched fantasy football league in the world, I am disappointed, to say the least, that he has scored 23 points the entire season through 4 weeks. I'm quite disappointed in that because I drafted him to score a lot more than that. The fact of the matter is, if you were reading between the lines with Terry McLaurin and also looking at historical context with guys who are holding out or missing training camp, he was almost always going to start slow. He was almost always going to start slow. In fact, you saw this with Brandon Ayuk last year. He started slow and ended up getting hurt after that. But look, I mean, you could definitely tell that Jaden Daniels, when he came out at first, was more comfortable with Deebo Samuel. And then Jaden Daniels himself gets hurt. He has a knee injury. And so with Terry, it's a quad. They're not putting him on IR. He's considered week to week. But they play at Atlanta in week 4. My guess is at the latest, Terry and Jaden Daniels are going to be back by week 5. And so I think you have a 2-week buy window for Terry McLaurin and potentially Jaden Daniels if you don't believe that the mobility is going to be limited. But mainly Terry McLaurin because, look, and Terry's 30 and he had a disappointing start to the year. But he was already starting to look a little bit better in week 3, even with Marcus Mariota in there at quarterback. And with Terry, he's the guy that you buy for the end of the year, which is why I'm addressing primarily 4-0 and 3-1 teams, is because I think at this point, Terry McLaurin could slam return on investment in weeks 13 through 17. When you're looking at that stretch, he has Minnesota in that stretch in week 14. He has the New York Giants in that stretch. He has Philly in week 16, which is tough, but then in the championship week, he has Dallas. And so those are weeks where if the Washington Commanders, which at this point it seems likely, they are playing for some kind of playoff spot or playing for playoff seeding, Terry McLaurin is going to be somebody you're going to want to own in those games. And so, again, if you're a contender and if you have started off the season well, I think he's a great buy. I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with how he was playing before the injury. And even if it does take him a week or two to ramp up after the injury, that's why you can afford to do this, because you're undefeated or you only have one loss because you're really good at fantasy football. And Terry, I think, is going to be a good buy. Again, this is still a very good offense with a very good quarterback. And Terry McLaurin is still a very good receiver that just got a very good contract. That's 4 very goods. And the 5th one is he's a very good buy for your fantasy football team.
I think George Kittle is a great buy for those of you who are really struggling at tight end right now as well. We did this last week with Rashee Rice, where we're like, hey, we're getting pretty close to Rashee Rice's return. And every week from here on out, people are going to be too attentive to the fact that he's going to be back soon, so you're not going to be able to get him at the price that you're able to get him even last week. And same thing kind of applies to George Kittle, but on a lesser basis, because obviously his impact as a tight end isn't going to be as much as like Rashee Rice's upside and capability as a wide receiver, just when you're talking about the value of those positions. But with Kittle, he's going to be back very, very soon. It probably won't be next week. I would guess it would probably be like a week after next, so like a couple weeks from now. Yeah. But this will be the best time for you to go get George Kittle, because the teams that suffered from the George Kittle injury are probably struggling in terms of record if they've suffered from any other injuries on their roster in the short amount of time that we've had fantasy football this year. I mean, you just saw Malik Neighbors go down with the ACL. What if they have Neighbors and George Kittle? What if they have Kittle and Warren is down, and then they have the bye week this week? Like, that really super sucks for them. So George Kittle, I would go and try and capitalize before he comes back healthy, because you've seen what this offense looks like without him, and that is basically hoping that Pearsall stays healthy so that they can get him targets, hoping that Jennings stays healthy and he can't, and then just dumping it off to CMC constantly. Like, this offense has a lot of weaknesses, and it's because they're not fully healthy right now. So once Kittle's back, you're going to see a whole nother level of offensive effectiveness and impact come back with him. You know exactly what he's capable of, and I think he'll bounce right back. I'm not really worried about it, honestly, because we've seen Kittle have injuries like this in the past, bounce back in the middle of the season and be totally fine. He's tough as nails.
I'm going to go with Trey Benson here as a buy for your fantasy football team. I think a lot of people are disappointed and kind of angry that he only had 10 points after everybody on Fantasy Football YouTube was saying, hey, drop your entire fab budget on this guy. Look, if you dropped everything on Trey Benson, it was well worth dropping everything on Trey Benson. One game doesn't change that. When you're looking at the usage, 37 snaps to Amari DeMarcado's 26, Obviously, that's not as lopsided as you want it to be, but realistically, it was never going to be that lopsided. You remember James Conner last year. James Conner in 2024 was the running back 11, and his snap shares looked consistently like this. He would have games over 79, 80%, but then a 58, a 62, a 54, a 69, 59. Percent snap share last year. I mean, they were doing the same thing with James Conner and Trey Benson last year, and Amari DiMercato was kind of a three-way where they were, splitting kind of. James Conner got half, the other two got a quarter. What you're going to see is, and what you saw in this first week where Trey Benson was a starter, he had 55% of snaps, so he's going to get half the workload here in terms of being on the field. He had 8 attempts, which you like to see more of, but again, the Seahawks got up in this game, and they had to pass the ball. They were never going to run the ball a ton. He also had 5 targets, and a lot of people are going to remember, the only thing we're going to remember from this game in terms of the running back production is Amari DiMercato walking to the end zone and scoring the touchdown at the end. And realistically, he had 10 points. He only had 2 targets in this game. So it's not like he was the heavy receiving back over Trey Benson. Trey Benson had double the targets that Amari DiMercato did. He just happened to be in for the 2-minute drill snaps, which is, important, but it's not going to make or break you. But when you're looking at the usage here, early downs, Trey Benson, 33. Amari DiMercato, 3 snaps. Short yardage, Trey Benson, 3. Amari DiMercato, 1. Obviously, third downs and 2-minute drill are where, Amari DiMercato in this game had 16 2-minute drill snaps. There aren't going to be 16 2-minute drill snaps in most of their games this year. And so when you take that out and you're considering, the fact that Trey Benson is on the field and still getting receiving usage on pretty much every down besides third, he is going to have touchdowns this year. And for him to have 10 points in a game, for him to have 10 points in a game where he only had 8 carries, 35 yards, and 0 touchdowns, his receiving upside actually showcased a floor that I really like to see, knowing that I can start Trey Benson in my flex spot and not be completely concerned that he's going to lay a goose egg. He was already dropping 8 points a game consistently in weeks 1, 2, and 3 before he became the starter in week 4. You just saw his new floor. His floor is slightly more elevated. And honestly, this is really his floor because they're probably not going to be passing the ball as much as they were in this game against Seattle. I think you're going to see plenty of 15 to 20-point games for Trey Benson in the future, and you're going to want him on your fantasy football team when that happens. And so, where people are ranking him right now in terms of his price right now, obviously everybody moved him up a lot. There are some guys in here, though, that I think I would be willing to still send for Trey Benson, looking specifically beyond or behind him. Deebo Samuel, Chris Olave, DK Metcalf, I would probably send for Trey Benson at this point. Mike Evans, Travion Henderson, I'd be more comfortable with. Jordan Mason, I'd probably... that one's close. Actually, probably wouldn't do Jordan Mason. Keenan Allen, though, I definitely would. Michael Pittman, Jalen Waddle, DJ Moore. So all those guys, if you can send them for Trey Benson, I think you're going to see some people drop Trey Benson down their rankings this week. I'm not moving him down at all. I think what you saw was, again, his floor game, and I think once he has his ceiling games, everyone's going to be like, I'm really glad I spent all my fab on him. I think Trey Benson is a buy after this week.
So we're really digging deep for this last buy here, but I think it's worth talking about because I don't know how many people are really recognizing this. Alec Eilmanor, number one, if he's available on waivers right now, I would go ahead and take him. He's got like 60% ownership in your leagues, and I think that's too low for a guy that is literally the lead wide receiver in terms of opportunity and snaps now. You looked at this matchup against Houston this week. Alec had 41 snaps to Calvin Ridley's 27. Calvin Ridley was the third wide receiver in that offense when you're talking about Lockett getting 36 and Alec getting 41, and Alec out-targeted everybody in that offense. There are not a lot of productive assets there in that offense. You can't rely on Alec to have a big day for you every single week. I'm not saying that you should go sell the farm for Alec or overpay or anything like that. What I'm saying is if you're negotiating in a trade for one of these guys that we've mentioned in this video, for a Trey Benson, for a Terry McLaurin, for a Chris Godwin, for a Xavier Worthy, for a George Kittle, go get Alec Eilmanor, get Alec thrown into that deal. Get him as a throw-in, as a bench piece, as an add, an upside shot if this offense can figure anything else out with Cam Ward. Because Cam Ward right now, he still looks pretty talented. That offense is in shambles. And honestly, Callahan could get fired at any point. And the reason that's the case, and I think he's feeling it, and I think he knows that he's on the hot seat, they have to try new things out. And they're trying new things out with Alec Eilmanor. They tried to win with Calvin Ridley, and he can't catch a ball worth a darn. So they got to try new things, and they have to go with the young guys. So Alec right now has lived up to the opportunity that he's gotten. He's capitalized on it. He's gotten a couple of touchdowns, and now he's getting more target volume, more time on the field, and that means more fantasy points than any other receiving asset in that offense. That's not saying a lot, but it's enough for me to mention him. If you want to do a Calvin Ridley for Alec Eilmanor flip-flop, like, go for it. I'm totally okay with you making that swap at this point because the new wide receiver one there is Alec.
I was going to say, I think Calvin Ridley's kind of cooked at this point. So.
Yeah.
Hopefully this helps. Hopefully you can send some trades for these guys in your fantasy football leagues. Do us a huge favor. If you enjoy this video every week, drop a like on the video and make sure you're subscribed as well if you play fantasy football, if you've been watching our stuff. It helps us know that we're growing our audience and also directly supports Nathan and I as we try to build the channel. So we really appreciate you guys doing that. We've got our panic video coming out right after this. So we appreciate you guys. Turn those noties on for our next video. Thanks for watching and we'll see you here in a few.